So Grace was diagnosed a month after she turned 2, which is pretty young for some families. Grace was a typically developing child. She had speech, she was engaged in her family, and we had what's considered like the typical 18-month regression, where she lost speech, she kind of withdrew from her family and just kind of became more inward. I remember a point laying on the couch with Grace one day and thinking, my daughter will never say my name. When we got her diagnosis, we kind of started early intervention at the time. So we were doing speech, OT, and behavioral therapy. So she was on a full-time schedule between all the different therapies she was getting. Despite all the therapy that Grace was getting, we really weren't seeing much progress in terms of what I thought we would see. So once we realized these therapies were not working for Grace, our next step was to seek ABA therapy.
On June 4th, 2015, sorry. On June 4th, 2015, we received Maxim's diagnosis. You know, I immediately went into a dark place, to be honest with you, and I stood there for about close to 2 years. And I immediately started him on every therapy known to man. In that therapy, one of the things that I realized was, of all the therapies, the one that was really where he was making the most strides was in applied behavior analysis therapy, otherwise known as ABA. I was fascinated by the amount of growth that he had made, that I always had wondered if he could or if he would, and he did.
Blake is a very special little boy. We found out at 13 weeks he was going to be a little boy, and then we found out at our 20-week scan that Blake had a lot of little complications that were going to require surgery after he was born. He's had all kinds of things. He had 5 surgeries between 9 months and 2 years old, and then 6 months later, he got diagnosed with autism. So May 2nd, 2018, we got the news that he was on the autism spectrum. Immediately, I called my mom and cried. And then I sent a text to my best friend and I said, "What was that therapy that you said your son did?" And she called me and she said, it was ABA. When my husband and I went to the first gala, we didn't know a lot about the Autism Hero Project. We had found out maybe 2 weeks before that it existed. And we saw the videos of kids that were severely impacted by autism, and we realized how fortunate we are that our medical insurance covers ABA, covers physical therapy, covers OT, which is occupational therapy, and speech therapy. And we couldn't imagine, if financially it was a barrier for us. So we became monthly donors, and we wanted to help all these families be able to access this therapy. We wanted to help become the financial bridge for these families that, wanted so badly to help their children, but just didn't have the financial resources.
The main inspiration behind the Autism Hero Project was to give families who were less fortunate than ourselves financial access to be able to get the therapies that they need for their children.
Most people think you apply for insurance when you don't have insurance, but Grace's situation was different. Grace's dad is a union worker. Grace had amazing insurance, but it would not cover her autism, and we found ourselves paying out of pocket in order to get Grace therapy and ABA treatment. Without the grant, we wouldn't be able to afford the out-of-pocket costs for Grace to receive ABA therapy.
When Tamika and I go through all the applications, we cry because these families are desperate to get help for their children. They love their children so much, and they just want to get resources to them. And when they get our video message or our email and they find out that they've gotten a grant, you can just hear the relief in their voice.
The Autism Hero Project provided us with more than just a grant for Grace's insurance. It provided us with a community that we needed. And when you have a support system, it makes you feel less alone in the world.
We want people to make space for these kids. We want them in typical classrooms for a portion of their day so their peers can learn from them. We want them in, schools when it's appropriate for general education. We want people in the community, if they see someone flapping their arms or making a vocal stim, to realize, that's just their way of calming or their way of, balancing their body.
Regulating themselves. Yes.
Regulating themselves. We want people to ask questions. It's really okay to ask a question.
I think this is what's going to make me cry, right? There's so many people who Grace is the only person they know with autism. So if I sit and I take in the negative, that's what I show them, that autism is a negative thing. I have no choice but to be positive. I have to set the example that Grace is okay. Her friends and her deserve the best in this world. And that's my motivation to being positive in autism. Everyone's gonna feed off of what I give them about autism, and if I'm their reflection of autism, it's gonna be positive. There is no other option for me.
In the ideal world, we would have had legislation that really gains, access for our families, no matter what their income level is. Because children with autism become adults with autism. And unfortunately, there's like this cliff that the minute that a child becomes 22, there's absolutely barely any services out there for autistics to be able to access. And so little by little, we've been pivoting into different things. Over the 5 years of our existence, we've been able to create, inclusive restaurant spaces, and that's expanding, and employment within that, which is awesome. And then we've been training police departments, and we've done it for the last couple of years, and we're doing all these community partnerships. We're doing pop-ups with local businesses, and that stuff needs to continue, because that's how the awareness and the acceptance comes in, and it becomes normalized, because it should be. My goal for the Autism Hero Project is to expand our services so that we're doing more for adults on the autism spectrum. That's the big dream.
If I had one wish for Grace, it would be for her to reach her full potential, whatever it is. It would be to see her living the most independent life that she can. This therapy has provided my daughter an opportunity to find herself. It's provided us an opportunity to get to know Grace and see who she really is and who she's always wanted to be. And without ABA therapy, we would have never been able to see that.
Grace. Yeah, you're Grace.
She's our amazing Grace.
It takes a lot for 4 women that don't take a salary, 3 of us who have kids on the autism spectrum and other children to do this work. It takes a village to be able to raise this money, and we can't do it without you.
It really does take a village to raise a child, but I believe that it takes a child with autism to raise the consciousness of that village. Autism is beautiful. I would not trade my kid in for the world. He has been my best teacher, and I am a teacher. He has taught me more than I could ever teach him, and he truly has made me the best version of myself. I wouldn't change Maximilian for the world, but I would change the world for him, and that's what I hope that the Autism Hero Project is doing.